Okay, hello. I hope the glare back there isn't too annoying. This isn't usually where I hang out to set up and film, but I have both my laundry going and my dishwasher running, so it's like really noisy out in the main area. So I'm actually hanging out in our second bedroom where, as you can see, Dan has my fiance, has his own little setup here with a computer for his gaming and stuff, and there's some really freaking cute Legos. Really freaking cute. My favorite Legos are in this room, and I'm never in this room, so it's actually very sad. So anywho, I thought it would be fun because March is National Nutrition Month. I actually feel like I keep thinking about that, but I've not heard anyone else say it, so let me confirm. It is March. Why is no one talking about this? And if you can't see, I have my laptop down here, which I am going to keep with me for this video, just you'll understand why in a sec. So yes, March being National Nutrition Month, I thought it would be fun to start doing this type of video because I am a registered dietitian nutritionist. So I, for my work, talk about nutrition all the time. And my role as a dietitian currently, I work as a consultant dietitian. So the company that I work for is actually a collective, that's a weird word, I don't know, we'll go with it, we'll roll with it, of dietitians run by a dietitian herself. And they create contracts with different companies, hospitals, whatever, in the area, like around where we live. We live in a few different states, but like we all live somewhat close together. They have these contracts with different hospitals and clinical types of settings to have their dietitians go into and do the work for. So it's typically hospitals that don't have enough of a need for like their own in-house full-time dietitian, but obviously to like meet regulations and guidelines and provide patient care, they do need to have a dietitian, so they contract through us to have us go in and do the work as needed. And I may not be an expert in exactly if that's exactly correct, but like that's how I understand it and what I've kind of been seeing in the buildings that I've been contracted to go work for. And there are a lot of different roles that can be done, but primarily, other than like long-term care, like nursing home types of environments or like actual hospitals, smaller community hospitals typically, my niche seems to be within behavioral health. So I primarily am working in inpatient psychiatric units, and I have had so much fun with that environment. Like that really works for me, and I think it's because I'm a little crazy myself. Crazy in an endearing way, of course. Like I don't mean to say crazy to shame people, but I have psychiatric diagnoses myself. I have ADHD. I've always had generalized anxiety. Currently I'm kind of going through a thing, I think this is psych, but unofficially probably being diagnosed and trying to manage PMDD, premenstrual dysphoria disorder. So I fit right in with these patients, and I don't know, I think it's rewarding and fun to work with this population. So I wanted to talk about nutrition related topics that I've talked about at work this week. Now the week is not over yet, but I have done most of the work that I'm going to be doing this week. And also something that I do on every Tuesday, I have 2 different psych buildings where I do weekly nutrition group sessions. So in these inpatient psychiatric units, there typically are regular group sessions that cover a variety of different topics to teach the patients different like life skills and like coping strategies and stuff like that. And a few of these buildings have asked if I would be interested in teaching nutrition to the patients. And I'm like, absolutely, I would be, because I really actually enjoy that type of a setting. In prior roles I had as a dietitian, doing kind of the group education type of work was one of the more enjoyable parts of my role, which is actually so funny because most people are scared of public speaking, right? And I, of course, was when I was like growing up and in school and stuff, but I feel like ever since I came into my career, I really enjoy public speaking, especially when it's about nutrition because I'm obsessed with food and nutrition. So it's like I talk about it all day regardless. I love being able to educate like a group of people. So a lot of the conversations I have around nutrition kind of stem from these group sessions, but I do have a list here on my laptop in front of me about some of the specific things that we talk about. And I just thought it would be fun to kind of go through them because, again, I can chat about nutrition all day, 24/7. Like, I'm obsessed. So I can easily gab about this. This is a little bit of a sporadic list. So I think first what would be helpful is giving you a little bit of context because, again, most of these are based on those group sessions I have. I always have the same kind of foundation of what we cover in those groups because in these inpatient psych buildings, usually the length of stay where the patients are in the hospital isn't very long. So usually we don't have a lot of crossover where it's like, oh, I already saw you last week and you're coming to this group and we're going to talk about the same thing again. That usually does not happen. Usually they're discharged by that point. Okay, I told you I have like my dishwasher and my washing machine going. I hear like water in the walls or something right now. Very disturbing. I also might get interrupted here in a second because we're actually having a water related issue. Our water heater stopped working, so that's really fun. So we might have maintenance coming here soon. This happened actually, we live in an apartment complex that is relatively new. We were only the second people living in the unit, and the water in our area is so hard that within like a year of us moving here, so like within a couple of years of this being built, the hard water corroded the water heater like unit so badly that the water heater, like the heating element, burst, and we had to get that replaced years ago. And now we're gonna have to probably do that again because I'm sure that's what happened again. So that's frustrating. So if we get interrupted, that's why. But anyway, okay. So in these group sessions, usually we have like the same foundation of what we're gonna be talking about, but I am such an open book with nutrition and I'm so open to conversations of like whatever's gonna be most helpful for the patient, which is why there's a lot of diverse conversations, of course. So I always start off my groups that way, saying like, so I have something that we will go through and talk about, but I'm open to whatever questions you have. And both of my groups this week were so interactive and engaged and asked me so many questions. That was so exciting. So we didn't cover as much of the foundation of what I usually talk about, but I think it would be helpful to explain like what I usually talk about because a lot of this stems from that. I'm sure that my head's in the way, but I'll put a picture on the screen of what I'm talking about here. I always start off talking about something called the MyPlate, which is America's like regulatory like foundation for what a healthy balanced diet looks like. I'm obsessed with it. I think it like just clicks with my brain. It makes so much sense to me, and like I just find it so helpful for people because it is so universal, but also you can individualize it and tailor it to your own needs. So typically I'll go through this and kind of explain the reasons why I think it's so great to use as a foundation, a template, a starting point for people, and how I've used it with patients I work with one-on-one for different reasons, whether it's like to manage a specific medical condition, or if they're trying to gain weight, lose weight, if they're trying to eat more healthy, or like not sure what their diet's missing. Like I always give examples of like why this is helpful for specific people and like almost everybody, and then how I use it for my own eating style, because this is what I use for my own eating style. Obviously not a perfect system and you're not going to follow it perfectly, but I like it because there's not like nitpicky calorie counting and like measuring of your different like portion sizes and stuff like that. Like portion size is a factor of it and important, but it's not very like micromanagey. And as a side note, I just have like no interest in calorie counting and like measuring portion size types of stuff. And I think it is kind of a side effect of my ADHD. I recently discovered I have some sort of form of something called dyscalculia. Like you might be familiar with dyslexia, which is kind of similar because that's with like letters and words, whereas dyscalculia is with numbers. I struggle so much with like times, dates, money, calories, and like this types of like weight, like those kinds of things. Like I really struggle with those numbers and they like don't mean anything to me and I get them very jumbled. So I am not interested in calorie counting and stuff like that. So I thrive with a system like this instead. So anyway, usually I'll go through it in a little bit more depth, but we can talk about that at another time so I don't gab your ear off about the MyPlate, because I totally could. But of course that is what I usually start off with, and usually questions come about throughout that conversation. So Something that was asked was about hydration. So this patient raised her hand and she was telling me about how she really struggles with drinking water and how she really knows how important it is for overall wellness and even her mental health, but like she can only get 2 cups 2 cups completed per day. So later on I talked with her more one-on-one and actually did order an intervention for her while she was with us in the hospital to give her more Gatorade just to make sure she's getting plenty hydrated. But stuff that we talked about is that there are other ways to get hydration. So like water is the best, obviously, but different fluids are going to be helpful as well. Of course, we had one of the peers bring up beer and I was like, nope, that's not what I meant. A lot of these people that are admitted could be for substance use. So he was bringing up his love for beer and I was like, not really appropriate for this conversation. But anyway, it was kind of funny. So different fluids are helpful if they're hydrating, of course, like water-based fluids. And even honestly, food does have water content naturally within it. Like it's not the best way to get our hydration needs met, but if you're eating fruits and vegetables and like different food items, there is water within those items. So if you're struggling with just drinking water, but you are eating a really great varied diet with a lot of produce and maybe drinking other fluids, then you're probably not as behind as you think you might be by hearing you're only doing 2 cups a day. So I kind of went into some reasons that it might be difficult to be getting those hydration needs met and getting beyond that 2 cups a day type of thing. And something that I thought about, because I also live with migraine, something I've often struggled with is just bouts of nausea. Now I have a weird experience with nausea because of migraine, to the point where I just like turn off something in my brain and don't notice I'm nauseous anymore. Like it's hard for me to decide that that's what's going on when something's off. Like it's hard for me to identify that it's nausea because I very, very, very seldomly will vomit. So like I just ignore it and push it to the back of my mind. So nausea is a weird thing for me, but I have noticed a lot in the past that nausea will make it hard for me to drink water even. And even actually this morning, funny enough, I'm migraine symptom free today, but feeling a little icky in other regards, and I have this weird habit ritual of chugging a glass of water first thing in the morning, and it just like was very difficult for me to do today, and it usually isn't, and it was because I'm a little bit nauseous this morning. Not anymore. I'm kind of getting over an illness and starting my period, so like things aren't great, but not migraine related. And I do remember a lot of times in the past when I was like in high school or something and waking up early and doing that same goofy thing, because this has been a lifelong habit for some reason, of chugging a glass of water, like almost having to vomit initially because I'm like, I feel so nauseous. And so a lot of people that are in like these psychiatric inpatient situations could be starting new medications or just feeling very anxious, so they could also be dealing with some nausea. So we talked about like the best way to be properly hydrated is having a very easy go-to reservoir to drink your water from. So I have a water bottle, which is not in this room with me because I'm not usually in this room, but I have a water bottle, and actually I don't even know what I'm talking about. I don't use the water bottle at home. I use a cup at home, but I have a bottle that I take with me everywhere that's like a big bottle that keeps the water cold. Although I'm a weirdo, I don't like it to be too cold. I'm very like temperature sensitive, so I like it to be a little bit not cold. But my fiance, oh gosh, I'm gonna break stuff. My fiance has the same water bottle and he likes his water ice cold, and it keeps it cold for like days, honestly. And like it's just like the spout and everything, like the way that it's so easy to drink water and the way that I don't have to refill it very often because it's very big, that makes it very easy for me to drink water throughout the day. So having something just readily available that you like and works for you is great. I mean, I've had so many water bottles in the past, and there's ones with a straw. I don't like drinking through a straw. Like it just isn't the method that I prefer. So even if I had a water bottle like that, I know I don't like it, and I'm less likely to use it because I don't like it in that method. So finding something that you like and works for you is the best way to make sure that you're regularly drinking water, because it's so easy when it's readily available. We also talked about like ways to kind of monitor your hydration levels, because there's not a straight answer of how much water you should drink a day. Like we have the general 8 cups a day rule, but there's so much more that goes into it because it's based on your own personal like height, weight, activity level, and it can change day to day, like if you're sweating more because it's hot outside, or if you are being more active, or if something else is going on, like your needs can vary. So watching out for symptoms like this is always cringy to talk about, but watching the color of your urine to see how like clear it is to show how hydrated you are, or noticing other symptoms, like if you're feeling like you're thirsty, you may already be behind on how much water you've been drinking. Kind of watching other symptoms, like I always notice if I'm not doing well with my hydration, my lips get extra dry, so stuff like that. Okay, wow, we really got stuck on that topic of hydration, but we did in the group as well, so it's fine. Something that does always come up is this discussion of fad diets, because someone asked me about the carnivore diet. It's actually so interesting to me as a dietitian because I'm not into fad diets and I do not promote them or encourage them, but I do understand like the interest and the buzz behind it, and they're like flashy and people always do want to know like what do I think about them. It's just interesting because the carnivore diet is the one I keep getting the questions about lately, which used to not be that way. It's like a more recent question I've been getting. It used to always be about like low carb eating in general, like a keto diet, like that used to be the question, but now it's carnivore. So I mean, disclaimer, I do not recommend the carnivore diet because you're missing a lot of important nutrition when you cut out so many food groups. And that is one of the reasons I always express how important and great the MyPlate version is, because it's a template that you can make work for you, and it's just like proven to be healthy and nutritious, but you can tailor it to your own preferences, and it can help you meet those health goals in a much more like healthy, sustainable way than doing something that eliminates almost every food group except for meat, you know, like anyway. I also very frequently I put this under the fad diet category. I also frequently get asked about fasting. I had some major miscommunication about this actually, because I assumed someone was asking me about intermittent fasting, which is where you have specific eating windows and like fasting windows each day. So you do eat every single day, but it's within a certain window of time. But of course, again, I'm working in psychiatric care. They were asking about just like stopping eating. And I was like, well, let's not do that. So it's goofy. That actually happens every once in a while, but like I get asked about intermittent fasting so often that I don't immediately think of that. But actually a couple times in the last few weeks, people have asked me about like, what if I just stopped eating? Or somebody that kind of had like religious thoughts tied into his psychosis was asking me about fasting for 40 days and like was so upset that I wasn't like gung-ho, like go do it, because he's like, but it's like a religious spiritual thing. I'm like, but it's not healthy. Like you need to eat. So anyway, intermittent fasting I get asked about a lot, and honestly I think that it's not the place to start. I think that everyone kind of has a different method that works for them. So I'm not very judgmental about specific dietary things that you might prefer. I personally am someone that's more of like a grazer. Like I will eat from the hour I wake up until like right before I go to bed and feel great doing it. Like that works for me. I like to eat very regularly, and that makes like it works for my body. And that's not how everyone is. A lot of people, and this is kind of the thing that I usually point to, a lot of people when they first wake up, the like hormones that kick up to get you alert and awake for the day suppresses your appetite. So it's very normal to not be hungry for breakfast, and I feel like a lot of people who are naturally drawn to eating breakfast first thing in the morning kind of turn it into this thing where they just call it intermittent fasting, because they're kind of, by the fact that they're not eating breakfast early in the day, they immediately are like creating a longer fasting window and a shorter eating window. So like they can just like naturally put themselves into that situation where they can call it intermittent fasting. Not that that's right or wrong. I think it's more helpful to eat breakfast early in the day, but again, with the appetite being suppressed, I do understand why sometimes people fall into a pattern where they don't have breakfast. I think that, of course, once your appetite comes back, like you should be ready for breakfast within a couple of hours of waking up. But I understand also that, you know, mornings might be busy and maybe you're already into like your workday at that point and it's not realistic to have breakfast. So I think the most important thing is consistency, trying to keep a regular pattern of eating, and even if that means not eating breakfast, maybe you can throw in a mid-morning snack and just try to consistently do that, and of course keep your other meal times regular and consistent throughout the day and, you know, daily. I'm actually going to jump up to the top of the list. This was not group session related. It was actually an email I received at one of my buildings from a nurse, and I just found it to be a very interesting talking point. Oh my god, I think I need water. Should I grab some water? I'll grab some water. I'll be right back. I actually don't know if I'm allowed to have water in here. Oops. Food allergies. I freaking love talking about food allergies. I don't know, it's one of my like special interests with nutrition. Part of that is because my fiance has so many food allergies. So I feel like I just have a lot of lived experience. We've been together since 2012, so that's like 13 years at this point. So I've just been around that for so long, and I also just find it so interesting thinking about like therapeutic diets and specific dietary needs that people might have. I like that topic. So I got this question from a nurse, and she asked essentially that she's been in the field for a long time. She's not new, she knows stuff, but she was like, I heard of the first time, instead of just a latex allergy, somebody told me they had a fruit/latex allergy, and she was just confused by that and expressing that she's like, I don't know how to closely monitor my patients going forward. Like, I don't know if I'm missing stuff, like what's the best protocol to be cautious and like not put people at risk. Basically that. So she was just confused because she's used to that latex allergy, but she's never heard of it being tied in with fruits before. So I looked into it very briefly because I actually hadn't specifically heard of that, at least recently. It wasn't fresh in my mind. And essentially what happens is the protein structure of latex and the protein structure of some fruits are quite similar. So if you are reactive to one of those things, but your body like is recognizing that the other thing is similar, you may react to the other thing as well. There's a lot of examples like this, but basically she was just like, what the heck do I do about that? So my response is that it's just kind of individualized every time, and the best protocol is just to ask patients that have a known allergy if they've ever noticed that they react to something else, because they may not, but they might, and they'll probably have that experience to let you know, or you can just be cautious if you know that they have any allergies that potentially there's a risk of reacting to something else, and just like, you know, not make it a whole thing, but be aware. The examples are kind of like, I find whenever there's someone that has a listed penicillin allergy, whenever I'm chatting with them and asking them my nutrition interview questions, just, you know, establishing whatever I need to establish and maybe educating about whatever they might need, a handful of the time, not always, but sometimes these people with penicillin allergies will tell me that they can't eat blue cheese. Because again, there's like that similarity there where their body, because they react to penicillin, they might react to blue cheese. Now, not all of the patients tell me that. And then again, with my fiance, again, he has a lot of food allergies, and I mean a lot, and it does get very convoluted because not only is he allergic to some foods, but he experiences something additional called oral allergy syndrome, which I find so interesting as well. But essentially it's another allergic response, but it is correlated with environmental allergens. So if you have like seasonal allergies, you're more at risk of having oral allergy syndrome. And what happens is with fresh produce, you might get some throat and mouth irritation, especially with like the skin of the fruit or like the outer layer of the produce. And for him, it's been so tricky because he has food allergies, so he's used to having risk with these other food items, nuts and legumes, but he's also noticing over time that he reacts to some of this produce as well. And it's like trying to figure out if it's an allergy or oral allergy syndrome has been a little bit tricky. But something that I gave as an example to this nurse is that whenever he was getting tested for his food allergies, there was actually this whole like extra layer and like documentation that was provided to him for education, because a lot of these nuts and legumes have related like plants that if you are reactive to this thing, you might also be reactive to this thing. So from that, he discovered because he's allergic to every single nut and legume. Of course he is. He discovered that he couldn't have many fruits with pits because they were so closely related to whatever nut or legume. So allergies are just so freaking interesting to me, right? I don't know. Anyway, so I kind of explained all of that to her, and again encouraged like just asking patients whenever you see a listed food allergy, like what their experience has been, and you know, kind of just continuing to be aware of it. I don't know. I had so much fun with that topic, even though it wasn't patient education. And that patient wasn't in the hospital anymore. Otherwise, I would have gone and found them to talk to them more, but oops, they were gone. Okay, back to group nutrition sessions. So this actually is more along the lines of my second group that day on Tuesday. The earlier group related things were more from my first group of the day. So the second group was a little bit less patience and less conversation, at least less productive conversation, because they were more sick, I would say. But one of the main concerns that one of these patients had was just that she has such low confidence in the kitchen, and she didn't have as hard of a time when she was a child eating healthy and balanced meals because it was already being prepared for her. It wasn't her responsibility, it was other people making that food. And now that she's an adult, she just like doesn't know how to prepare food. She relies very heavily on convenience items. Her meals are very simplistic. Like, she was listing things that were already pre-cooked to me, like not different food groups, just like reaching for something that's easy that she can just pick up and start eating. And that's something that her situation was probably a little bit more extreme, and we actually talked a little bit more in depth about it later, and she's hoping to get in touch with a a skills coach that can hopefully help her develop some skills in the kitchen to become more confident and prepare more food and get comfortable with like meal planning and grocery shopping. But stuff that we talked about in the group was just like how to find very simplistic ways to prepare food, like kind of like beginner friendly ideas. So usually whenever I'm wrapped up with my topic of talking about the MyPlate, I like to give the patients, especially if there's like not a lot of questions, like I just have to keep talking about something. So I give them examples of easy food pairings that are kind of MyPlate friendly, that are very like regular meals that they might be familiar with seeing. So I talked about some of those ideas with her that are low food prep required. So like a PB&J, she actually mentioned she does PB&Js, and they're not like the ideal perfect nutritious balanced item, but when you think about it, when you think about the plate, our grain section, we have the bread, our protein section, we have the peanut butter, and then it's a stretch, but we could call the fruit the jelly. I mean, ideally you would have something else on the side to really buff up the like produce part of it. Or I also gave the example of you could do a peanut butter banana sandwich. I like doing those. But yeah, that's relatively low food prep. I also talk about like I don't know, even fast food, because that was kind of a discussion that was brought up with this whole topic. A few of the patients had this experience where they have low energy or low confidence, so they reach for fast food. So even when we think about a burger, again, not oh shoot, I gotta go. Oh man, I'm back. I actually took a really long break there. I told you we might get interrupted by maintenance coming to fix the water heater, and come and fix and interrupt he did. It took a bit longer than I expected, but that's totally fine because I should have hot water again. It's gonna be fabulous. Let's jump back into it. I have no idea exactly where I got cut off, but I know I was talking about this low confidence in the kitchen issue, and I feel like I'm not centered. Am I centered? I am not centered. It's a little better, whatever. Anywho, okay. I'm not totally sure that I resolved that topic, but we're gonna move on because it's been a minute, and also now I need to start prepping my own lunch. Talking about food is not a great idea. I'm gonna get very hungry. So one of my people in this group was also very fixated on some of the mental health concerns he had. Understandably, that's the reason he's in the hospital. It's not to learn about how to have a healthy diet, but it's always exciting when they are interested to learn more. But he was kind of curious about how to support, especially like dopamine and serotonin regulation with diet. And I'm sure there's a lot of like further research that I could be doing to learn more specific answers for that, but I tend to find that especially like general education for most people, we really want to start with the foundations and the basics with nutrition, because just having a general, healthy, balanced, consistent diet is going to be the thing that's the most helpful place to start for an overall healthy life, overall wellness. So things that I was specifically pointing out to him, especially with my own experience with ADHD and issues that I have around dopamine with that, I did emphasize the importance of the consistency with our eating, because like making sure we're eating regularly and satisfying, satiating meals that are well balanced will feed our mind and make our brain happy. And doing this regularly is so important so that we can keep something kind of regulated and stable within us. And sometimes people, especially with ADHD, that are on some sort of stimulant medication, this can really impact appetite because it can suppress that appetite awareness of your appetite. And it's so important to know that even if you're not feeling the signs of hunger, biologically your body is still hungry and needs nourishment. So trying to create a routine around your diet and having like certain times of day that you are regularly having a full satisfying meal is super important, just to keep things going and healthy. But I also, for like dopamine, serotonin types of stuff, something that I do like to talk about is like our comfort foods and some like routines and rituals that we might have around food, because partaking in those kinds of things can give us that extra boost of those feel-good hormones. Like I like to give the example of coffee, which again, it's a stimulant, and may not be appropriate for everyone, but it's very important to me to have that morning ritual of my hot cup of coffee, just plain black coffee, and just partaking in that habit and that routine is very soothing for my mind. And even in periods of my life where I've taken myself off of caffeine, I still wanted to have like a decaf coffee in the morning to keep that routine going, because it was something that was so rewarding for my brain. And having those things that are like our comfort foods or our go-to favorite foods can also release those feel-good hormones, just because we have such a deep emotional connection to those things. So those things can also be important to think about if you're trying to think about dopamine and serotonin and how to feel good with food. All right, moving on. I think that was essentially all that was covered in the second nutrition group that I did that day. These other two like buckets of topics were talked about when I was doing one-on-one nutrition education with patients, which is a larger aspect of my job, where like whenever I come and I screen people who are at nutrition risk that have admitted to the hospital since last time I was there, if they have certain factors or I get a referral to go see them, I might talk about certain topics with them. So I actually had two patients that were diabetic related types of things. So which one was first? The first one was actually someone who had just been recently diagnosed with pre-diabetes. So he doesn't quite qualify yet for having type 2 diabetes, but whenever I was speaking with him, he was an adult patient and he has a younger brother who is type 1 diabetic. So he has seen not necessarily the same route, like the same situation that he would be in if things were to progress, but he's seen aspects of it, and like having to be very, very cautious about carbohydrate intake and having to heavily rely on medication, insulin, and those things kind of worry him. So it was kind of a motivator to not have things progress. Now, I could kind of ramble off some of the things that I would educate someone like this about, but actually he kind of turned me away, which happens sometimes. He declined the education. He said he had already been introduced to these topics. He already has an interest in nutrition. He has a background of being an athlete and worked with a dietitian in a more like sports nutrition capacity. So they didn't talk about like diabetes management and prevention and like how to regulate blood sugar, but he does have some foundation of knowledge in nutrition. So I just kind of tried to plant some seeds in case he doesn't really know everything, because I mean a lot of it is very easy for most people to already know some of these topics, but sometimes we don't know what we don't know, and sometimes we have misconceptions about different ideas. So I did try to sprinkle in a little bit of light nutrition education about blood sugar management, and we can talk so much more in depth about this another time if you have more interest in this topic. But I try to not overwhelm people when I talk about really any topic, but with this I have there are two main things to focus on when it comes to blood sugar management. The first one is considering our portion sizes of carbohydrate foods, which again, there's a lot to talk about, and I try to not make it overwhelming. But if someone is brand new to this concept, this idea, this topic, we would have to talk a lot more in depth about what are carbohydrate foods, why do we care about that, what are appropriate portion sizes, how do these things impact our body. But we will not cover that right now. So importance of being mindful of our portions of carbohydrate foods, not cutting them out of our diet because that's really not realistic, but thinking about the portion size. And then the second most important topic is incorporating balance into our diet. So kind of like that MyPlate thing, it always comes back to the MyPlate, but including other food groups will help digest things more in a more regulated way. So when we're adding things like fat, fiber, or protein into a meal, those things digest slower and break down in our body in a more sustained manner. So that can be helpful for most general non-diabetic people, because fat, fiber, protein keeps us more satisfied longer, keeps us satiated, and controls our appetite, so we're less likely to turn right back into eating again because we've been satisfied and we have these things still breaking down and digesting in our body. But for people with diabetes or pre-diabetes, they digest slower and slow down the rise of blood sugar in the body for these people. Now, the second person that I talked to in a diabetic capacity was actually a child that has type 1 diabetes, which was ironic because I had just talked to an adult that said he had a younger brother with type 1, and then I talked to a little boy that had type 1. So they were not related, but it was a weird coincidence. Now, this kid actually has been well informed for sure, because I had him reflect a bunch of things that he had learned to me about how to manage his type 1 diabetes with his diet, and things that he needs to consider, and specific dietary things that will help support his health. So again, it's kind of similar topics, but type 1 and type 2 diabetes are different and are managed differently, and then pre-diabetes of course is different as well. But this little kid, of course, type 1 diabetes, it is something that does impact health significantly and early in life. So it made sense to me that this young boy had a lot of knowledge, and he was very confident in it as well. So I hope that he's still doing well, even though I haven't seen him in a few days. But I will be following up with him if he's still in the hospital next time I'm in, just to see that diet stuff is being followed and he's being provided the correct snacks and stuff like that. So anyway, that's all about diabetics. So next, this again is something that comes up a lot, healthy weight loss. Now, I talked earlier about kind of my disinterest in calorie counting, and that kind of has to do with a low interest in numbers, basically. I'm also really not a weight loss dietitian. I am very open-minded to whatever it is that you're going through, whatever dietary practices you are trying out, whatever your goals are. I'm here for that, and I will find a way to work with you to get towards that goal in a healthy way. So I really consider myself more of a weight neutral dietitian. It's frustrating because a lot of the hospitals I go to, one of the nutrition risk factors that I have to go counsel patients about is their weight. If they are overweight or qualify for obesity, that's a trigger, and I'm supposed to go give them education. That doesn't always feel appropriate, especially when we're in somewhere like a psychiatric facility where they are in for mental health issues. It would feel very weird for me to go up and be like, hey, you're fat, you need to lose weight. I would never say that anyway, but it feels weird because even if I don't go to them saying essentially that that's the reason I'm coming to talk to them, they can figure that out. So it's a little bit yucky. So I'm not very much interested in weight loss and encouraging weight loss unless that's a goal somebody has. If there is somebody that's at a higher weight and I'm being told they would benefit from weight loss and I'm supposed to give them education about that, I will usually come at it from a different angle. Like if there's a different medical condition going on, like a heart health condition or blood sugar issue, using any of those dietary protocols to treat that will also support weight loss. So I'll usually come at it from that angle, or I'll just chat with the patient about healthy general eating in general, and of course that correlates with weight loss, but I'll kind of try to get a feel from them about what goals they might have and what they could potentially do better to have a more nutritious diet, which again would promote weight loss ideally. But I'm way more about like building healthy habits than I am like, let's get the number on the scale smaller. So I don't ever go up to someone offering weight loss education, but if they tell me they want it, I give it to them. So this one was a little bit more tricky though, because it was a teenager. And the conversation, I actually went up to them because I was told that there was a risk of disordered eating habits, and I didn't know all the details quite yet. So I went up to them to just kind of get a feel for what's going on. And that is something that's pretty common in my psychiatric facility, especially the one that I go to that has kids. I find that there seems to be a pretty consistent amount of disordered eating. And it's not an eating disorder facility, and I'm not an eating disorder dietitian, so I'm not like qualified to really treat that in depth. And if they do have severe needs in that area, I always recommend a referral elsewhere. But I mean, I have a foundation of knowledge and will chat with them about that. So I was meeting with this teenager, and they first of all did not bring this up, but they had other questions for me. So we started talking about what a healthy diet looks like for a 15, 16, whatever, how old they are, what a diet would look like for them to be healthy. And that was the way they brought it up. So we talked kind of like general healthy eating, kind of like the MyPlate stuff, and encouraging things that are nutritious and would correlate with weight loss, even though I don't really recommend weight loss for children. And I didn't like come at it as like, well, if you do this, you're gonna lose weight. I talked about like healthy eating and like the benefits of it. And I just know that it would promote weight loss in adults. And they, again, did like steer the conversation elsewhere. And the way that they like talked about some of these topics didn't come off as them having thoughts of like disordered eating urges or behaviors, but they did later admit, because I asked them directly about it, because I'm like, so I mean, this has been a very good conversation. We've talked about like, you know, how to feel your best and get strong and everything, but I knew that there was potentially this going on. Can you tell me more about that? And they did admit that early on in their weight loss journey, because they thought that they had been on a weight loss journey. This is kind of weird, but they said that there were some behaviors that happened, but it's been a long time ago, allegedly. I don't know. So it is still something that I'm monitoring as they're in the hospital. But there was a miscommunication, I think. I won't give the exact numbers, but essentially they were pretty excited because they're like, within the last like 3 years, which is a good amount of time for weight loss, they said that they had lost a significant amount of weight. And so I asked them more about that, and basically they reported around a 100-pound weight loss, something roughly like that. Again, I'm not going to tell you the exact numbers, but I didn't really think that much of it. But as I'm standing there talking to them, the weight that they were reporting currently being at, I was like, I don't think that that's correct. But I wasn't going to like poke the bear on that one, so I was like, whatever, okay. And then I go back and I look at their chart after I'm done talking to them, and the weight they told me they were at is just completely not true. They were still at that like almost 100-pound higher weight. So I was like very confused, and I think that there was a miscommunication about pounds versus kilograms. I think when they were in a hospital, like an emergency room before they came to us, maybe they saw their weight or were told their weight, but it was in kilograms. So it would have appeared to be 100-ish off of what it was weird. It was a weird situation. But anyway, that was a whole thing. But along this healthy weight loss and like weight loss versus like if we're doing it a healthy way kind of thing. Later on, I went to an adult unit, and I didn't actually get to talk to this patient due to like severity of symptoms and them being asleep part of my visit there. But I was told that they had low appetite / intakes before they got to us, and there was a quote written down next to the nutrition risk screening that they use, oh, should I say this? Is this appropriate? A substance. They use a substance for weight loss, an illicit drug. So I saw that, I'm like, oh, that's not good. So I was going to talk to them, but of course it didn't work out. So we will follow up with them when we can. But I was talking with their nurse about it, and it was a kind of frustrating conversation, not with the nurse. The nurse is great, but the nurse was telling me how this patient kind of gave her more context about what was going on with using the substance for weight loss. Basically, this guy was seeing his doctor, and his doctor was encouraging weight loss and wanted him to lose weight. And this guy has an addiction to an illicit substance that can be correlated with weight loss. And so in later appointments, the doctor would praise the weight loss and praise the effectiveness of whatever it is he's doing, but never asked what he was doing whilst he's using this like extremely dangerous product. So it's like kind of funny, but like very much not funny, because that's terrible. So I just wanted to highlight that aspect of my day, because I think it's so important, first of all, not to make comments about other people's bodies, and when we're seeing them lose or gain weight, making comments about that, because you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. But also just highlighting how frustrating it is for me to think about someone like trusting their doctor, their physician, someone in the healthcare field, and being praised for effectively losing weight, but the way that they're doing it is so unhealthy and damaging to the body. But the healthcare person is not asking any further questions about the overall health and wellness of the patient, and like not seeing any red flags with this weight loss and maybe the way that the person's doing, like trying to lose that weight. It's a little frustrating for me. So anyway, again, I'll have to follow up with that patient if he's still in the hospital that time that I'm in, but yeah, we'll have to talk about healthy weight loss strategies that are not substance use with him later on, if he's receptive to it, of course. So that's everything that I have. That was all of the like interesting conversations I had around nutrition at my consultant dietitian job this week. Let me know if any of these topics stood out to you, if you wanted to chat more about any of these, or if you were interested in more conversations that I have around nutrition going forward. I think that this was fun to talk about, because sometimes it's just like, I feel like I want to reflect on all of these things that I've been doing all day, but I don't get to do that unless I'm talking with my significant other or something like that. But I think I can chat about with you. So anyway, toodles, I will talk to you later, and have a great nutrition month here in March.